Okay. So today we are going to have the wonderful talking about partnership. To me, aging is not a single concern of a single sector. It should be a universal concern or universal blessing to anyone in the society, no matter just a newly born kid or to my mother, who's now 97. Okay. So I think this is our great section to talk about how we can build up a close partnership with the private sector, with the CSOs, with the government. And today we are very excited and happy to have a very distinguished speaker from us. The first one is Chris, a handsome guy from Philippines. Yeah, woo, woo, woo. And then he will let us to know about how he sees the partnership and the experience, also share with us the challenges. And then we have wonderful lady, Janjarin. Okay. And you are from Thailand. You can see how wonderful Thai lady. Okay. And then she will serving as the discussion. And then we have another young lady from Vietnam, Queen. Yeah, and he is an analyst, a social policy analyst. So after Chris sharing his speech, and then we will have two discussions to help us to give our feedback. And then the section is going to address to two important questions. What is about? It's talking about, when we're talking about partnership, what are the characteristics of government and CSO partnership, particularly with the private sector? What are the different concerns come up, any conflict, and what we can achieve by understanding each one? And also how we can build up the mutual interest to enhance the partnership. And the second question is, what are the steps should the government to take to encourage private sector partnership? Some people said that we should have the so-called legalize it as a mandatory requirement. But I think I always don't believe in this kind of movement because it's only a so-called forceful energy, but not really a good energy. So we'll address these two big questions during the section. So without any further ado, may I call upon Chris to share with us his finding, his wonderful presentation. Thank you.
So this is much easier. So I'm Chris from Merck, Philippines, and I want to talk about the role of women in aging in Asia. Why women? Well, first of all, I'm a feminist by nature, and the Filipinos are really feminists. We have a saying in the local language is that women are the light of the household, because if you don't have women, she'll knock your lights out. And a bit of advice my father gave me regarding the women. You know, son, that whenever you have a discussion with your wife, you should always have the last word. And if those last words are yes, dear, so be it. All right? So I want to talk a little about women and aging in Asia because the aging population in Asia offers an opportunity for women. Because I'm sure you've heard from Philip's speech that one of the key means that we can address the aging population is to increase labor force participation of women. And we're going to see how. So you see here essentially that we have a looming age crisis that's driven primarily by a decline in the fertility rates. At the same time, people are living longer. So in the red line, you see these red economies. These are countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, China, Japan. They will have, by 2060, it's estimated that 36%, around 1 in 3 people, will be above the age 60. The middle income economies, so this is Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, essentially they're at 6% now, but it will quadruple to 24% by 2060. 1 in 4 people is above age 60. In the green line, these are the younger countries like the Philippines, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea. 17%, still a significant proportion. So this increasing share of elderly puts a huge burden on the working age population. You look at you've seen this slide before, the reduction in the percentage age of working population. These are the red countries up here, Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, Thailand's here. And the younger countries like the Philippines, Timor-Leste, Laos. And the population distribution will change. By in 2000, you see around, you can't really see it here, around 64% are the working age, the green is the elderly. So I don't want to go through the graphs, but here by 2060, it's estimated that for every 100 people who are working, there are 94 dependents. This counts the people who are under age 15 and over age 60. And in orange economy, 67 dependents per 100 working age individuals. Such a big burden for a shrinking workforce, right? And the thing is, this challenge is not just creeping on us slowly, it's creeping on us rapidly. Professor Takemi said that it's actually a tsunami of aging that we are facing, right? And the thing is, aside from the aging per se, which is probably a challenge in terms of the dependents, there comes with it health challenges. Because the diseases of the elderly are not the same as the diseases of the young. Elderly face diseases like non-communicable diseases, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, right? And women in particular are more vulnerable. Why? Women live longer than men. But it's estimated that 2 out of 3 women will die from NCD-related causes. And women have particular vulnerabilities. You know that in thyroid diseases, this little butterfly-shaped organ over here, women are 8 to 10 times more likely to suffer from thyroid diseases than men. Women suffer from particular cancers, breast cancers, ovarian cancer, lung cancer, cervical cancer. Women also suffer from fertility issues. Again, this sensitive topic, but you know, after age 38, your probability of having a baby drops quite rapidly. And cardiovascular diseases. This is the #1 killer of both men and women. But the NCD challenge, we don't have in Asia a particular strong support system which can support this. So NCDs pose a significant financial pressure on health systems because compared to acute diseases, NCDs are chronic. For example, non-communicable diseases like diabetes and hypertension require everyday medications. That's really expensive. And these are not currently supported by most pension and support systems. Work, family support are still the major driver of old age support, especially women who are primary caregivers of the elderly. Now, in all this, we're painting a pretty gloomy picture, right? But it's a complex problem, but this complex problem provides us an opportunity for public-private partnership. Because the complexity of the problem means that this cannot be solved by one body alone, but needs multi-sectoral support, right? So, you look at this. If you are able to unite the government, the private sector, and CSOs to one common goal, you multiply and leverage their efforts. And this is the foundation of public-private partnerships. Different sectors, driven by different motives, maybe, but they work for one common goal. Because, for example, the government will have a different end in mind. They want, I don't know, increased productivity or address the demographic burden. Private sector, famously, we are driven by profit motive. There's no denying that. CSOs have their own advocacy. But if you're able to align these incentives with each player creating value, because again, each one will have a different incentive because each one has a different purpose. And each one has a different strength. Each one will have a specific role, creating value in innovative solutions, right? Government, in public-private partnerships, they have complementary strengths. You have government has access to the innovation and the efficiency of private sector solutions. The private sector gets the support of government policy to leverage as a multiplier effect, essentially, and to legitimize its cause by partnering with CSOs. The CSOs, civil service societies, or civil service organizations, they get the multiplier effect of both the private and government resources for their advocacy. Because I'm sure as a CSO partners here are aware, you may have an advocacy, but funding isn't that really easy to come by at scale. Because if you really want to get maximum leverage, you want to get resources to get your advocacy reproduced at scale. This is best when you get government and private sector resources. So putting all three together, you get innovative solutions. And PPPs, contrary to what most people have a misconception of, match the needs of the particular partnership. There are many kinds of PPPs. Most people think PPPs are the contractual PPPs. Like the government outsources this to the private sector. Okay, that is one kind of PPP. But it's not the only kind of PPP. You can have soft PPPs or market-making PPPs. And I'll be discussing more on this later. Because, for example, in soft PPPs, you can create an initiative with the government in the spirit of partnership. I want to give an example from the Philippines. The thyroid diseases, which are really common in women. Again, they're 8 to 10 times more common in women than in men. In the Philippines, we did the Specialty Society of Endocrinologists did a survey, and they found that 1 in 11 people will probably have a thyroid disorder. But at the same time, the national government did not have a program for thyroid disorders. The national government didn't even know that the scale of that problem was that big. The research was done in 2012. The government wasn't aware of it until 2015, right? So what we did in Merck was that we aligned the Philippine Thyroid Association, which is the leading thyroidology specialty society. It's composed of specialists from the field of endocrinology, surgery, otorhinolaryngology, nuclear medicine, and even family medicine physicians. So it's a Philippine Thyroid Association. We aligned them to work with the Department of Health in order to create a national program for thyroid disorders. We're still in the first year of implementation, but as early as now, we've already reached 13.5 million people in terms of our advocacy. We have a draft national policy already available, and we have trained over 2,000 physicians and other healthcare professionals in thyroid to improve their capacity to diagnose and manage thyroid disorders. And that's just one PPP that we've been doing. Now, a lot of people are curious, how exactly do you go to PPPs? You can't just go up to the government and say, hey, let's do a PPP. The kind of approach, again, that you want to see is it's based on 3 things: incentive alignment, value creation, and the innovative solution. I created this draft. This is now my approach when I approach governments for PPPs. Kilos. Remember, you have to identify the key stakeholder. Who is your partner? Who could be the good partners for your advocacy? Could it be specialists? I work in pharmaceuticals, so probably doctors, maybe nurses, right? Who's your partner? Incentives. What do they want? Remember, you do not try to sell your idea to that person. You'll never convince him that your idea is important. You want to appeal to their selfish initiative. What is it? What do they want, right? How is what you want also what they want? Always put yourself in the perspective of your partner. What would they be expecting from a partnership? What do they hope to get out of it? Why are your incentives aligned? That's the incentive. Leverage. What can you give? This is the value creation. What exactly does your organization have that it can offer your partners? And remember, when you do your leverage, appeal to their incentives. All right? Don't just make sure when you propose your PPPs, your leverage points match the incentive points that you've identified. And finally, look at the objections and obstacles. What could they not want? Why are they ambivalent? Because again, if they were really into the PPPs, they would have done it a long time ago. Why haven't they done it? Identify that and provide your solution, right? So you have the Kilos framework, which I made, copyright Chris Herrera, and then this is how you approach the different stakeholders. Because again, I learned the hard way. I'm a medical doctor by training, but I think communications is really important. Tailoring your message to your partner has to follow their ideas, not yours, right? And finally, I want to talk about healthy women, healthy economies in Asia. This is a PPP that we've been doing as part of the APEC, or the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. Small plug, there are copies available outside in the table on the far left. It looks like this. Right? So if you're interested, please get your copies outside. Anyway, so again, we see opportunities in the aging societies. We have an aging population and a shrinking workforce demographic. We have weak social protection system. And one of the solutions identified really is to increase the labor force participation of women. This is a low-hanging fruit that we can see. And you look at East Asia primarily, look at the gaps in the labor force participation rates between women, which is on the left column, and the middle column, which is men. In countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Timor-Leste, it's around 30%. 30% difference in the labor force participation of women and men. In these orange economies highlighted, this is 2014 from the World Bank database, Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, Japan, a nearly 20% difference. And which is funny because despite the fact that women have already caught up to men in terms of literacy rates, primary, secondary education, in the Philippines, take note, more women have completed tertiary education than men, labor force participation still skews heavily in favor of men. And that's not even to mention the difference in salary, the difference in positions they get. So there's a labor force participation gap, which is, why is there a labor force participation gap? We look at women, and we look at their workforce cycle. They want to enter the workforce, they want to progress in the workforce, get promoted, climb up the corporate ladder, and you want to stay in the workforce, right? But they face so many barriers in this journey. They face barriers such as workplace health and safety. They face barriers such as health access and awareness. You'd be surprised how few women in the Philippines are really comfortable with their reproductive rights. Gender-based violence, we hear this a lot, but this is both overt and, what's the opposite of overt? Not overt. Gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health, and work-life balance. Again, this is a point that has appeared consistently in this conference, that work-life balance is particularly important for women because they do unpaid labor of the home, right? And in terms of economics, since this is the economic implications of aging, the gender gap is a missed economic opportunity. Do you know that this is a McKinsey study done in 2015, that if in these regions, all of the countries match the labor force participation rate of their countries to the best performing country in the region, you could increase global GDP by $12 trillion in 2025. Right? That's just by matching the labor force participation rate of men and women, as well as matching the positions and representation in work. But if you fully close the global gender gap, I mean, the global women participating at the same rate as men all over the world, it's up to $28 trillion. So you can see, not in terms of a wasted human capital, women really are the low-hanging fruit which we should be tapping right now. And how you do this? Through public-private partnerships. Again, this is the Healthy Women, Healthy Economy toolkit that we did. So you want to give a government an incentive to help a healthy workforce for economic growth. Because again, look at this. When you look at, the sad truth is that when you go to governments, they're also somewhat like the private sector. They talk about the bottom line. It's not just about the rights-based approach. We want that. I mean, that's a given. But when you start talking to policymakers, they're going to ask, what's our return on investment? How do we see the change? So this is a strong argument that women are a good economic investment. How do we increase their economic participation? And then we do that by promoting and encouraging a female labor force from early active working ages. You maximize women's potential. Let them enter the workforce. Invest in their productivity. Make sure that they get they get work-life balance here. And we retain women in the active labor market for the longer term by addressing women's issues, empower aging women because they're particularly more vulnerable to stresses of work-life balance and particularly health. This will allow Asian women to actively and healthily be in the workforce, right? So again, this is your common goal. You all want to address the policy demand of the demographic transition. But if you want to talk to government, you have to talk about their incentive, right? The CSOs are probably really aligned based on the rights-based approach. Just because you're talking about women's rights, they are with you. But if you're pitching this idea to the government, you need to give them an economic argument. So the Healthy Women, Healthy Economy policy toolkit is a sustained policy response for aging female population. So the policy toolkit gives you strategies and practices to improve female labor force participation through better health. This was launched in September 16, 2015 in Manila, Philippines during the APEC. This was done at the Women in the Economy Forum. This was done by 3 different groups, the Health Human Resources Working Group, the Health Working Group, and the Policy Partnership on Women and Development of the Economy, right? And this policy toolkit has a menu of options. It looked at the current literature on what are the barriers to women entering, progressing, and staying in the workforce. What are the health barriers based on the 5 buckets we identified a while ago: work-life balance, sexual reproductive health, workplace health and safety, etc., gender-based violence. And how do you do this? How do you address these solutions through policy, right? And this toolkit is targeted towards policymakers from both the private sector and the public sector. And we've been doing this as Merck. We've been driving the localization of the Healthy Women, Healthy Economy toolkit, as policy toolkit, to actually translate into benefit for women. So we've used this to launch the MOU that I mentioned for thyroid disorders. And currently, I've been working closely with the Department of Health to create a scorecard that operationalizes the different suggestions in the policy toolkit, and that the government can now check, is this company women-friendly? Does this company need more improvement in its practices for women? So that's what the scorecard is supposed to do. We've also used the Healthy Women, Healthy Economy policy toolkit to drive this literature in Japan. It's from the ACCP. Healthier Women, Healthier Economy in Japan. We're currently doing some policy research on women's unpaid work. This is done in California. And we have a PPP with the Jordan Royal Health Awareness Society to increase awareness of diabetes among women. So in summary, the complexity of the shifting demographic problem isn't necessarily a problem. In fact, it's the complexity that makes it an opportunity. Because you can't just have one player in the game, you need everybody here. A complex problem requires a multi-sectoral approach. And the partnerships between the public and private sector need the three key elements. Incentive alignment, make them realize that you are all working for the same goal, right? Because, for example, what I did for the thyroid MOU, I couldn't just say thyroids are an important issue. Because, again, if thyroids were an important issue to the government, they would have done it a long time ago. I had to make them realize it, because what I did when I talked to the government was that, hey, did you know they were pretty big into women's health? I mean, yeah, we've heard about the Philippines. We've done the reproductive health law back in 2012. It's because the government has a strong priority for women's health. So what I did was, when I approached the government, I pitched this as a neglected women's health problem. So that clicked the bells in their head. Oh, this is a women's health issue. It's not just about thyroids. It's about women's health. So I was able to enter that using that leverage point. That was the incentive. Value creation, what does each partner give? And what is the innovative solution that you can do by working together rather than working individually? And talking about the Healthy Women, Healthy Economy, this addresses the health barriers to women's participation in the workforce. It aligns the government policies for economic growth and a healthy workforce, captures a missed economic opportunity, $28 trillion. That's one figure I want you to remember. Encourages to start addressing the economic dimension of the problem, allowing later we can address the social dimension. And it provides a framework to address the challenges facing aging women who will have a significant share in the population. Right? So maraming salamat. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I think Chris gave us a very wonderful framework of when we're talking about partnership, what kind of consideration, what kind of indication that we want to see. And then I think he also used a very wonderful case about aging women, of which always being neglected, particularly for those who never been working. That means they never be employed, but really a housewife. How we can really taking care of them. Okay. So now we come to two distinguished discussions. The first one will be Darren. Will you mind to share your views and also your comments? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that that's up to Chris. I think he captured really well how private sector, CSO, and government can work together in a very systematic framework. And I would say that for coming from private sectors with the background in development, I think this captured really well how both sides can come together and how to create, as Chris said, shared values, which is extremely, extremely important. So I guess what I'd like to add is that no matter the industry, business is now done on a global stage. So performance is usually judged by not only government, not the international lenders who give you the money. It's also being judged by the court of public opinions. And if you're a smart company, you would not want bad things to happen to good projects. And the cost of errors can be extremely high. Like the news travel, just it's a few hours. We're not talking about days anymore. Or like the latest example in Vietnam, I think a lot of many Vietnamese participants here probably heard of Formosa. Yeah. And I mean, in the past, like a lot of people would think that they will get away with it. But that's not the case anymore. And the government is getting stricter. They react to public opinions more, which I think is actually a good step forward. I remember when the news about Formosa, by the way, for those who don't know, it's a steel plant that released, there was some problem and it released toxics to the sea, which caused a lot of death for the fish and destroy livelihoods of fisher people. They had to pay the fine of $500 million and issue official apologies. So that's like an example, you know, how a project that initially was being brought here with the idea of injecting development into the economies can go really wrong. I remember the speak person for their social team replied to the news that you have to choose between livelihoods of fisher people or industrialization. And I'm glad, like, as a practitioner in this field, he got fired, like, almost right away. So I would say that, don't get me wrong, companies will never replace government or NGOs. They're still profit-making entities, but there is a space where all stakeholders can actually come together and work together. It has to be based on mutual respect and transparency on both sides. Like, otherwise, this partnership will always fail. So just to touch upon the aging issues just a little bit, with one of the clients that we're working with is a refinery project in Vietnam, and one of the biggest FDI at the moment. Our clients actually have the obligations to restore livelihoods of people who got affected by the project. So our approach was, we will not go right into cash transfer, because this usually results in people who got affected by the project become even poorer and get trapped in the poverty cycle. Not necessarily, but a lot of times. So we took a holistic approach. I would say that our work with our clients can be divided into 3 parts. So health and safety, jobs and capacity development for people to be able to find jobs. And the third thing is livelihood focused. It's quite easy in this vibrant economy for prime working age people to transition their lives from farmers or fisher people into industrial workers. However, for age population, this is a whole different thing. But you still have an obligation to restore livelihoods. Our clients get audited by international lenders every 3 months. So what do you do with this very, very special group? So we decided that we need to actually take a holistic approach that really not only restore their financial capital. Like these people, by the way, when they get resettled, they get compensation from the government. But what does it mean for an old lady living alone, almost blind at 8, like she's 80 years old? No one's taking care of her because her daughter married somebody and they live far away and another person working in the city. So our approach was also to build more social capital to help community to be able to help themselves. And in this regard, we're actually working with tons of service providers. Lots of them are actually NGOs or consultancy firms that are specialized on social issues. And I would say that it's not easy when we start working together. I think Quinn sitting here, he was involved in this project that we're working in this special economic zone. A lot of time, NGOs or government would approach certain issues that based on their mandate and would say, this is how we always done it, and this is how you have to do it to succeed. Private sector these days, I would say they're quite educated that if you would like to take a long-term approach, this is probably right, but they have tremendous pressure from shareholders as well as time limit. So back to Chris' point again, you have to start from where you can work together. Is this ideal? I'm not. You know. I would say like I'm not really. I would say I'm a realist. Thanks. I was looking for that word. So it's not ideal. Of course, it is not ideal. There's much more that private sector can do, but as they say, rising tide lifts a boat. So there's a foundation that you can build together with private sector in a time-limited scope. And there's much more flexibility since most private sector can, change their approach, do more what works, do less what doesn't work. And there's also the plus of the funding most of the time. I think I'll leave it here, and I'll let Quinn add on. And yes, thank you.
Thank you. Before Quinn add in, I want to share that actually it's now the global trend that all the stock market request the listed company to comply with two requests. One is the CSR, corporate social responsibility. And in Hong Kong, they even request the listed company to comply with the ESG. There's environmental friendly, social responsible, and prudent governance. So I think all this is already a global trend, of which provide a very wonderful opportunities for we as CSOs or elderly sector to ask or to urge them to partner together to carry out the better social capital. Yeah. So, Queen, please.
Thank you. I totally agree with Chris and Titapun here about the point of the importance of the public and private partnerships. Sometimes we look at the private partner and public and private partnerships, and many people look at that at a bit kind of a negative way of viewing, because they were thinking that for private companies it's more for their own benefit rather than for the overall development of a country. But looking at the UNFPAs and at the point of views that from the UN works, and also we're working a lot with the government, we see that the roles of the private sectors in many development areas, and specifically in this case on aging populations, private sectors do really play a very important role. First of all, I would really thank Chris to touch upon the issues of the women, because UNFPA's work and our UNFPA's work in our works, the genders and women play a big part of our work and programs. And also we see that as many women included in the informal sectors, which is not covered by many programs by the government. Social insurance and social protections is in many countries, especially for low and middle income countries, like in Vietnam, say for example, the coverage of social protections to informal sector, whereas many women working it is really still shortage. But then, just taking an example in my countries, in Vietnam, we look at the social insurance fund that providing for people, and the projections is saying that the fund is going to be diminished in the future. And the government's budget is really limited and has really a big challenges for the government to provide support to that. And then looking in that ways, then we see that the private sector play a very important role in sharing the cost of aging burdens, the cost of health care, and the cost of the pension commitments to the future for the current older people and also the future older persons. We see that older people actually play a very important role in the economies and in social developments. We heard about the talk about of Kim this morning that they are very powerful consumers, but at the same time they also have a very strong political voice. They are the one who vote. They will also play a very important part in the labor force, but the political positions of the older people to play in the country is very important. So the governments really have to look in a way, have to provide support to older peoples in the ways that if they want to have a really sustainable development, and also to have a sustainable kind of political environments, then the older people play a very important positions. But at the same time, for the countries like Vietnam or other developing countries, the government's budget and also solutions is really, they're looking, it's still struggling in finding innovative solutions to support, and also solutions to address the aging population in the future. So we see that the partnership between the private sectors, CSOs, and the government could come together, would really help in kind of create kind of identify doable problem and alignments to address aging populations, and that those solutions should not only address the older people of today, but we will look at a life cycle approach. It have to be also prepare for the future, for older people in the future. Then we see that, but then the issues is how we could make the link between the private sectors and the government. But sometimes, the two partners don't have a common voice, and people may think that this is so different. But actually, if you look at that, the government and the ministries, they care more about the public policies perspective, right? And private sector, they do call like private and benefits policies. But actually, if we all of these policies actually looking at the same aim at the same goals, the same prosperity and development goals. So if we could provide the evidence and about how these and the common elements of the policies by the government, and also the policies the private policies by the entrepreneurs, then we will have a common voice and come to the same goals. Before I finish, I want to share an experience of UNFPA. UNFPA in Vietnam has been working with Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry to create a forum between the private sectors and the governments and the ministries to discuss about aging populations and the opportunities for private sectors and businesses in the context of aging populations. And we found in the discussions that actually the governments and the private sector and the businesses do really care about the same things. But there's one thing there's a missing link between in data and evidence. I would like to emphasize about that, because the government, the way that the government looking at the data and evidence is more at the macro levels, and from the business sectors, we see that they do really want more specific informations about their own markets, about their own products, or the specific opportunities that they could create more, any new lines of any products or services. Then there's a missing link. But we also found that it's also an opportunity to really generate a kind of new way of collecting data and evidence that could bring together the governments and the private sectors, and to come together to create a new alignment for more also the same goals of development. I think I could stop it here, and then
thank you.
Team.
Yeah. And in fact, at the year of 2003, when Hong Kong faced up with the SARS, I think you all remember the SARS, that period of time, the Hong Kong government was really poor in money. But they found a very good way. They incubate a partnership fund. They're encouraging the NGOs, the CSOs, when you ask and obtain $1 support from the commercial sector, then the government will match up $1. There's a matching grant. They're 1-to-1. And so it's a very successful program that government allocate $300 million for 10 years that encourage the CSO to try their best to invite partnership from the commercial sector. At the early stage, it only counts on cash, hard cash. But at the second stage, it also counts in give in kind. That means if the corporate donate items to you, and they will use the consumer index price to convert into value, then the government will again match you the same amount. So I think this is one way that the government can play the game of partnership to support the CSO, support the society through wonderful matching. So I just want to give you one new dimension that we can think about this type of partnership. Okay. So now I would like to open the floor to all of you and welcome questions. And then we will take 3 questions, and then we will have our panel to answer. Thank you. 2 hands. Yeah. The gentleman at the back first, and then the young gentleman at the front. Yes, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I came late for some reason, so I missed your presentation. I guess that's a very good one. By looking at reaction from the discussants, listen to what they said. I think the issues of partnership, public-private partnership, and then now we have the CSOs, government, private sector working together. It's not new, but it's very important, increasingly important. But now I think, because I'm working for the UN, I'm working for UNFPA, I'm colleague of the discussant going over there. We have a really good framework to push forward the partnership between state government and private sector and the public. It's the SDG. I'm sure we all know that we have like the world now agree that we have the new agenda until 2030 in 17 goals and with a lot of target, 169 if I remember correctly. So the good thing about the SDG is that all the goals are interlinked and quite comprehensive. This is a kind of the whole government, whole society, and by mean like the whole society mean private sector and civil society, and all even down to the individual level. We all have responsibility and have space to act. So it's also a kind of global agenda. So this is a kind of framework that private sector, civil society, government, and international development partners can look at and use it to really find way for partnership. And you all remember that the goal divided into 5 groups, we call 5P. The first one is people. The second is prosperity, planet, and peace. The final is the partnership, which really emphasizes on what we're discussing here. So I don't give any question. I just give a kind of input for our discussion. Thank you.
The 5P. Okay. Yeah. The gentleman at the front.
I am Atik from Bangladesh. I am working with a local NGO, working since 1960. It's very huge and very old. And I am working with this organization for my personal interest because I am going older. And I want to make my place safe, secured. So, perhaps aging is the only universal biopsychosocial problem. Unfortunately, what I am preaching for 2 or 3 issues, public-private partnership or so many issues we are talking, but we are fortunate. This conference, we have a good number of parliamentarians. We are very much fortunate. But we are very much unfortunate. We do not have any ministry on aging affairs in this world. So my request, who will tie the bell the government, it is the responsibility of the government to open a ministry. Because, we have ministry for children affairs, women affairs, youth, but not aging affairs ministry. Number two, I want to request to United Nations, you are so many persons of different UN agencies. But, in United Nations, there must be an agency specific agency who will work for the aging affairs, aging issues. And it is unfortunate that no one is ready to be identified as a senior citizen or older. You are talking about civil society person. In my country, the very much powerful senior persons, at the very beginning, they come and say, I am young, I am not old. Who will take the initiative? So, if you want to change the total scenario, because we are thinking no one left behind, society for all ages. Yesterday, I opened my mouth that please develop a volunteerism involving the young generation, the students, so that they could get prepared for addressing their healthy and active aging and for providing support and services to the older persons. Thank you.
Okay, so anyone more question? If no, then we ask our panel to respond. Chris? Oh, yes, thank you.
I'm from Bangladesh. I am also from Bangladesh. I am working with a NGO named Resource Integration Center, RIC. So the question is public-private issue on aging is very new. And most cases, what happened that the private sector doing some charity under the CSR. So they give a money to some organization doing support or charity for the older peoples. So it's a private sector engagement is in terms of their original motive, profit incentive. So that sort of engagement is actually rare. I don't know where they are in market, through the market channel. They are actually engaged through the CSR channel, and it is not their engagement sustainable way. So the challenge is making engagement through market channel. And the older citizen, one of the prospect of this engagement is growing older people became a market. And private sector is always interested to invest on who will be the eligible for their consumer. So that way they could be engaged. And another way is a service delivery partnerships. So lot of demand, increasing older people has created demand, and public service provider is not enough to do the actually quality service. And there could be a subsidized government could initiate some services which they intend to do for the well-being of older people. So somewhere there is a non-profit sector, absence of NGO and other service delivery provider. And there will be the private sector come up with government partnership, and they could be a very effective provider for the older people in terms of health and others security. Because there is a financial services needed in old days, they are different from the mainstream services. So there will be the redesigned services, and that could be effectively delivered to the older people. There could be a new area for the private sector to engage and giving service to the older peoples. My questions is challenges. And different nation, different region has different challenges. Because where there is a strong NGO, and NGO sector, that mostly they could engage and they have make a CSR, getting CSR fund and they are engaged in. But where there is not a such a non-profit sectors, then private sector is could get a more role for the giving service to the older, providing service for the older person. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Right. Thank you all for your comments. Well, first I want to address the last gentleman from Bangladesh. CSR isn't PPP. If you look at CSR, it's I don't know. It's not necessarily a PPP because it could be just something like window dressing. I am doing a fun run. I am doing a mid mission. These are hollow and empty gestures which just make your brand smell nicer. But at the end of the day, there's no buy-in from the private sector. They're not doing it for profit. They're doing it probably for tax reasons or probably for advertisement. But the essence of a real PPP is, again, remember, incentive alignment, value creation, and innovative solutions. Because if you're not invested in this, because, for example, in the thyroid MOU, the Department of Health, Philippine Thyroid Association, and Merck MOU that I negotiated in the Philippines, the value creation for us, our selfish incentive was we wanted to create more awareness and to have a national policy for thyroid disorders. Because the frontline physicians for majority of patients in the Philippines are public health primary care doctors in the far-flung regions. They're not being trained. They're not being given enough equipment. So if you give them a national policy, they'll increase the diagnosis rate. Hopefully, they'll buy our medication. I mean, that I'm putting it on the table. That's the selfish corporate incentive. So we have a buy-in. I've been working closely with the Department of Health. I've been providing technical assistance for them through the past year, how to train, etc., coordinating them with the Philippine Thyroid Association. So there's buy-in, and I'm involved every step of the way. So we have to keep in our heads when we go back to our respective countries that we want to create a PPP, everyone should be a partner. Yeah. It's not just about doing an activity together for no reason, but it's an activity that hopefully will be sustainable, right? Because, for example, my framework here is that a CSO can provide an advocacy, a purpose. It can provide evidence. The government can provide and enable a policy environment which is friendly towards any activity. And lastly, the private sector can provide resources, technical assistance, or overall coordination. So each partner has a distinct value, has a distinct role. Again, if there's one line I want to end with PPPs, is that doing good is good business. All right? That's how you sell a PPP to a private sector person. He has to, although he won't admit it to you, obviously, but don't talk about it. It's kind of impolite to remind us we're profit-oriented. But always keep in mind that they will be thinking about their bottom line. Now, I'll address the second point about the Ministry of Aging and probably the need for the work for volunteerism. I think that overall we should probably shift our ideas of aging. Initially, I think maybe 100 years ago, when work was primarily manual, aging reduced your productivity. A 6-year-old man cannot carry the same number of cows as a 20-year-old man, right? A 60-year-old man can't hunt the same deer as a 20-year-old man. But since our economy and the entire world is moving to knowledge-based economy, which does not require physical labor and which will not necessarily dull through the ages unless you get, knock on wood, Alzheimer's or something like that, we have to have our institutions adapt to that. Right? Economic institutions, financial institutions, all have to adapt to the knowledge economy, and we all have to catch up. I think a lot of the crisis that we're facing right now is that we're just going to assume that as long as you're 65, you're a dependent member of society. That's how the figures are written. But if we shift the fact that even if you're after 65, you're a productive member of society, if you shift the framework, right, you totally revolutionize it. Right? The crisis that we see is only a crisis because there's an institutional lag between the advancements of aging and technology. But once we are able to shift our educational institutions, our social institutions to match life expectancy, the knowledge economy that we live in, I think that we are in pretty good shape. And lastly, thank you for the SDGs. SDGs provide a really good framework. I used to work in development before this. Yeah, that's what you hear from a lot of us. But at the end of the day, what we should do, this is just a piece of advice, is that SDGs are a good way. They're an overall principle framework. But when you pitch your idea, you'll probably be dealing with a local government, right? Frame it as SDGs as the background, but match it to what is the local policy. Like, the Philippines is committed to the MDGs, to the SDGs, but when I pitched my idea, I framed it on Kalusugan Pangkalahatan, or the local version of universal healthcare. So you always, again, when pitching an idea, follow the kilos approach, copyright Crisanta Herrera. Always talk about what does the other person want to hear, right? You shouldn't talk about what you want to hear. Don't preach to the choir. Change your message, talk to the person, tell him what he wants to hear, make him realize that you are a potential partner. Right? Partnership is the key word in PPP. It's not public, it's not private, it's partnership. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. How about Gerald? Yeah. Jaren?
No worries, my name is actually quite complicated even for a Thai person.
Yeah.
I think Chris covered most of it, and I like to re-emphasize again that actually I think CSR is dead. Right, it's a bit harsh. Okay, yeah, let's say it's half dead. CSR is not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. It's not, based on mutual respect. It's not based on transparency. And companies, a lot of time, they chose CSR because it's an easy way out. Yeah. They want to do good stuff, don't get me wrong, but they don't have the capacity, the experiences, and they fail. And there's a lot of skepticism from all sides, and that's when companies also get quite defensive. I think the new approach to PPP from private sector point of view is actually SSI, or strategic social investment. So strategic in terms that it aligns with the company needs first and foremost, because it's still private sector. Social, because it aligns with community and the government needs, but not replacing the government. And lastly, investment, because the company will always look at the return. And I'm not talking about financial capital. It's more of a holistic approach. For instance, what's the thing that an energy company wants? Why would it get engaged in social work? Well, first and foremost, it needs to pass international lenders' requirement. But more importantly, in the long run, if you have a factory or a refinery or some kind of project that will last about 50 to 70 years, you want to make sure you actually build resilient communities around you. Because in the end, the smart companies would know that social is cheap. It would take just maybe 10, 15 angry people blocking the gate of your factory or the entrance of your refinery, and you will lose millions of dollars. And times and again, the company realized that this is happening. There's no way that you can, you can't just take people away. You have to deal with a lot of bad press for years afterward. Like I said, no smart company wants bad thing to happen to good projects. Mm-hmm. So from private sector point of view, it's back to what Chris said. Nowadays, I think they're becoming more open to suggestions. Like my project, for instance, we sometimes struggle to find service providers in technical issues. And that's when I think it would be a great platform for civil society organizations to step in and say, we are the expert. So, let's see how we can work together. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the term called SSI. In fact, there also another new term called SROI, social return on impact instead of investment. But I think nowadays all the corporate, when they really partner with the CSO or partner with government, they want to see how better the people's living or people's life standard are improved. Instead of talking about one single money investment, how much money return. Of course, we can count it into value term, in fact. But I think the SROI is at a higher level to drive the corporate to see what they should invest properly. Yeah. How about Queen?
Thanks. I would just want to add some point. First, I would like to emphasize the role of the government in this partnership. Our colleagues here say that this is the partnerships and between the private sectors, governments, and CSO. Private sector and CSOs do play in the equations, but cannot replace the governments. And the government still have to. So the key role of the government is to provide a good policy framework to stimulate the involvement of the private sectors and CSOs. And at the same time, this is the government responsibility to ensure the basic access for all people, for all the populations. So maybe because there's some of the services could be accessible to the better off people, but not for the poor. So that is the role of the government to make sure that all the services are equitable, that everybody could have access to quality services. So that's one I would like to emphasize. And also go back to the gentleman's article, right? We're talking about agings and older people. And previously, maybe like 30 years, 40 years ago, when we look at the issues of aging and older people, I think people, and at that time, the first thing come to our mind when talking about older people is about healthcare, right? We know about healthcare, but look at what we see aging and older people today. It's not only healthcare. Older people, they do many other things. They need entertainment. They need like transportation. They also work. They also, lifelong learning, educations. So when you look at aging issues in older people, it's not just one issue that so we cannot attach the older people aging issues just to one ministry, say health. Say, for example, in Vietnam previously, the work on older people is more attached more to the Ministry of Health. But now, look at that's now. Then, so we also see. So we see that it's kind of the aging issue is not just like one single issues, and we can't just have one single solutions. We need like solutions and innovation from all the sectors, all the industries, all the sectors. So it's also kind of a cross-cuttings all over the issues. So if we look at that, then it requires the involvement of all the ministry, all the actors in the society. I would say all the actors, even not only the government, or not only all the ministries, not only private sectors, CSO, but also the community and family. So it requires all the actors in the family to really to address these issues, and it's similarly in the UN systems. UNFPA has been working on aging issues for many years. We started and actually that's the case of UNFPA in Vietnam. We are the first UN agencies in Vietnam mentions about aging and raising the issues to the government about an aging population and the future age population in the future. And we will continue the work, obviously. And we need to look at, as I say, it's not only just one dimensions of health or labor, but also all other dimensions, and not only look not only look at the older people 60 and above this day, but we also look at the young people, and from the young people, the middle age, the one in the middles, to have preparations, and we promoting the intergenerational approach in addressing these issues. And I think that that way, that approach should not only apply in the UN system, but also apply for all other actors who look at this issue to really concerned about aging populations?
Yes, thank you. And in fact, I think we have been covering about public-private government. But to me, nowadays, when the corporate, they give money for the CSO to carry out community project, they look for, what should I say, evidence-based. They look for finding. They look for impact changes. So I think we should not miss one very important part, academia. There's universities, because they are professional enough to help us to set our so-called parameter of evaluation, and then to show to the corporate that their investment in this social project really mean so many things. So I think we should expand our scope not only to 3, but also 4. There's private sector, CSO, government, and academia. And then lastly, it's about all walks of the society together, work together to improve the situation and to take care of the elderly. And to me, I think nowadays we're talking about elderly, it's not only health care, but also happy care. We have to care about their enjoyment, leisure, and as at this morning, we at the marketing segment talking about the elderly people are the core customers of the leisure, cruise, luxury product, such and such. So we also have to expand our coverage to happy care. Okay, another round of question or comment from the floor. Yes, Queen.
Okay, I have a question. And I think listening to the presentation was very excellent. Learned a lot more about what is private partnerships. It's much more strategic, much more long-term, and much more committed. But unfortunately, it looks like it's to me, especially in developing countries, it's like an iceberg. You only see a very small tip of it.
Yep.
Very small tip of it. So many other companies are unseen, unaware of this partnership.
Right.
So how can you flip it? You flip it so that there's majority of companies in your country are involved in this partnership. Right now, there's only a few. In Vietnam, there's very few that are very serious about partnership.
Okay.
And there are more in Hong Kong, but the poorer the country, the less developed the country, less and less you see. Some are also very invisible.
Yep.
But right now, what the million-dollar question is, what should we do to flip it? How can we flip it so that we will see clearly more and more companies, large national, international companies, more involved in this partnership?
Okay, great. So, second and third question, please. Yep. Yes, lady. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would like also to add, you have added one sector that is
academia.
Academic. But I think it's important also to involve the media because private sector always, government always like publicity. So the media could be, used to boost them so that they will be willing to do that.
Good, thank you. Yeah, here again. The gentleman, yeah.
Yeah, I just like to follow the lady
one more.
here. Yeah, I'm sorry?
No,
Go on. Yeah, I mean, here we're talking about PPP, and then we mentioned about the CSO. For me, it's a little bit like limiting when we're just talking about the CSO. Because here, CSO means civil society organization. So we think of like an organization. Maybe a group of few people can also be organization. So and now with the, the fast changing world, now we have a lot of media, a lot of venues for the whole society to participate in this kind of partnership. Let's assume like a virtual community. You can see like they don't have any organization. They don't have to register anywhere. But they do form a kind of linkages among people who share certain kind of interest. So if they concerned about the climate change, for example, or environmental things, they can form their own forum, virtual society, and it function exactly like a really effective as an organization. So I want to unpack the CSO.
Okay.
I want to expand it to something like bigger than that, mean the whole society through different kind of venues to join the partnership.
Thank you. And then the lady behind. Yeah.
Добрый день.
Yes.
Я представляю Республику Казахстан.
Good afternoon. I am from Republic of Kazakhstan.
У нас есть закон о неправительственных организациях.
In Kazakhstan, we have a special legislation related to non-profit organizations.
Недавно мы принимали о внесении изменений. Мы внесли в него изменения и дополнения.
Recently, this legislation was amended,
касающиеся как раз неправительственных организаций в части внесения их в базу данных.
One of the included recommendations was establishment of database of non-profit organizations which are currently working at the territory of Kazakhstan.
Так как на сегодняшний день у нас, в общем, более 30 тысяч неправительственных организаций.
At the present time, in Kazakhstan, more than 30,000 of non-profit organizations are working.
Но, к сожалению, многие из них,
unfortunately, the majority of them,
не ведут никакую работу, они неизвестны. Вообще работу по этому направлению. То есть они не работают, они просто создаются, и финансируются, возможно, да? Но непонятно, чем они конкретно занимаются и куда средства эти девают.
But unfortunately, the majority of them didn't bring real impact to the society. So they receive funding from some funding organization, but unfortunately, they didn't do nothing sufficient in order to bring sufficient changes in society in our country.
Чтобы привести это в порядок, вот как раз мы решили, что необходима база данных, куда будут внесены все неправительственные организации, работающие на нашей территории.
So in order to address this problem, therefore we decided to establish the special database which include information about all non-profit organizations which are working in our country and what kind of activities they implement.
И любой, как государственный орган, либо просто физическое лицо может войти в базу данных и увидеть все НПО, работающие у нас, по каким направлениям они ведут работу.
So every person in our country, as well as government institutions, can have access to this database and see what kind of organizations are working in the country and what kind of activities they implement.
И это очень удобно, я считаю. И
And
как раз
it
для
is
работы
very useful, especially during establishment of partnership between non-profit organization and government structures.
Yeah.
И в части, конечно, по вопросам старения.
Especially in the area of aging of population.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your sharing and also the importance of the data and also the transparency as well. Because I think when the corporate, they are looking for funding, investment or involvement, they want to make sure they are partnering with a trustworthy organization that really brings impact to the beneficiaries. So how about any comment from the panel? Queenie?
Yeah. And Queen has raised a very important questions, and because he was right that in Vietnam we really want to have the governments and have to promote the involvement of the private sectors in the work on aging. But there's a very few, very few companies and businesses really do or any work on these. Basically we see that actually this older populations, actually that's the huge market. It's not only the very huge market to consume products and services, but also a really strong drivers, the resources for the development if we really could take advantage of that. But somehow that group and that market was overlooked. and I think that situation is not only in Vietnam that it was overlooked, but also is in many other countries that market was somehow overlooked. From just my personal point of view, I think there's the really gap, the big gap of evidence and data and information in this area. When we share in our work with the private sectors in Vietnam, and we share the information, it is really highly appreciated about all the information and data and evidence about older peoples and about all the potential and the needs of older peoples and also the capacity of older people, what they could provide and could contribute. Then that is the big gaps in. So I think that if we could fill in that gap and provide more information, it also not only to help the government to have the full pictures on the situations in the countries and that specific population groups, but also for the private sectors and also other actors in the society can make use of that information to do their own good jobs, right?
Yep.
And also, I really like the comments and about the involvement of the media, and that's also all the stereotype about older people. If you look at the news, on the newspapers and on the televisions, the image of the older people is some very weak older people with these cans and working slowly. And so we need to really also change that stereotype. We're looking at older peoples and the senior citizens in a really different perspective.
Well, I think actually we also have to take consideration that there are always distorted image on CSO or distorted image on elderly, because they really have some labeling effect that some corporate they dare not to link up with any of elderly, just like Toys R Us. They are providing toys for kids, and it's seldom you can find them that really involved in elderly care. They rather would donate their toys to the orphanage other than elderly home. So I think we have to respect their corporate culture, their corporate uniqueness, and also their corporate identity. And second, I think so many corporate, they say, I want to help, I don't know which one is better, where to find them. So I think maybe the government can help to organize some so-called marketplace event. Let our CSO come to show up, and then invite the corporate to sit and meet with the people. So I think the marketplace event should be very helpful to this type of events. And lastly, I think we have tried our best to really de-label ourselves. I think as Chris has mentioned, we are not just coming to obtain, but to leverage, to contribute. In fact, so many corporates, they are looking for solutions to make themselves eligible for CSR or ESG. And we, CSO, and our service for the old people actually are providing contribution to them, help them to solve their issues, and also help them, their staff, to really taking care of the elderly. So I think these are all the possible dimensions we can have. In view of the time limitation, can I invite the floor to give 1 to 2 takeaways that you learned from this section? Anyone would like to share? Yes. Yes.
Social business idea could be compatible with the private, because this is a win-win game where the private profit also be contained, and at the same time the social benefit will be also ensured.
Yeah.
So if we give the idea that the public-private partnership will be under social business, then that could be a more get a more support, and also the image will be more brighter for the both government and private sector.
Okay, thank you. Anyone more? What you can take away from this section? Yes, Kate.
Thank you. I was just, I'm interested in the whole kind of concept of moving from CSR being, almost dead, and then and getting into this whole area of strategic social investment, and listening to you all talking about that, and thinking about the work. I'm from HelpAge International, but I came to Vietnam some time ago and visited the work that various organisations, but HelpAge, I think in particular, has been doing in the intergenerational self-help groups, and thinking about the long-term financial sustainability and growth of that model, because it's a model that has been embraced by the government here.
Yeah.
But I know the model that I visited, there was quite a significant investment on HelpAge's part to enable self-help groups to start and get sustainable in the long term, and whether they're just exploring that whole area of social enterprise, and maybe is there an opening there for looking, and maybe it's going on already, but thinking about products that could be in partnership with the Vietnam's National Women's Federation, is it called, or the older people's National Older People's Associations, for example, care insurance, health insurance, those kind of products, and just looking at the whole social enterprise model for the long-term viability of national models like the IS. How to come up with the initials for these generational self-help groups, because it seems to be one of the critical questions about the sustainability of the model.
Thank you, Kay. And then Janjari?
I think I might be able to answer that, since one of our projects is we're working in partnership with HelpAge. As I mentioned before, like we try a different approach with the whole population, and the age group is a specific one. So in terms of long-term prospect and the sustainability of it, we actually invested in HelpAge model from the beginning, because we've seen that it's worked. After 2 years, most of these clubs are financially sustainable. And in terms of relationship with companies, they have about 180-something age-friendly activities, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And within 3 months, we got a group of older people starting, bean sprout business. And for us, there's a lot of procurement needs in the area, not only with the company, the clients that we're working for, but all other major tenants. So we're actually, we're exploring the way to include that. Like, of course, the older people group, they're not at the level where they can bid or become the direct contractor or subcontractor. But from outside, from the company point of view, we actually link them up with subcontractor or people that can actually work with them in the long run. So answer to the company's need and align it with what communities want. And I think what I like to take away from this, and I like to emphasize a little bit, I think we should not, and companies as well, should not focus on the vulnerabilities of aged people. Actually, by doing so, you're actually doing more harm than good. Yeah. But apart from that, we actually focus on what they can do, focus on rights and entitlements and what they can actually contribute. And another program, for example, we're working with is early child care development, where older people learn a little bit from vocational training, and now they have ideas of not only just taking care of their grandchildren at home, but form a group and perhaps create business in the community.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, any comment?
Yeah, I just want to
last one.
Probably just to close. At the end of the day, you're going to see that technology changes in probably months. Policies can take years, institutions decades, cultures centuries. Yeah. But the thing is, we have to drive the shift of policy. That's a thing that's under your control. Technology, that's not, we're not a technology company, but policy is something we can drive through advocacy, through partnerships with the government, through partnerships with the private sector. PPPs are the opportunity for you to really drive policy in both the crafting and in the implementation. I think it just takes some sort of creativity on everyone's part, a little openness, that the private sector isn't necessarily the bad guy. The private sector is just wants the same thing as you, just masked under a different incentive. So if we're able to align and harmonize our approach, talk more about your commonalities rather than your differences. Start with the idea that you are all partners, equal partners here. Then you can probably push the PPP forward.
Yeah.
Doing good is good business. I just want to close with that.
Yeah, good. So thanks. I think we already enjoy a wonderful section. Of course, talking about the skill set, how to talk, how to invite, how to persuade the corporate to be your partner is another level workshop. It can take you 3 to 7 hours training. So I think we can have it in next conference. Okay.